Hello, Dr. Miaken Zeigler here with Zeigler Chiropractic, and I just want to welcome you today and acknowledge that you are investing in your time to be here. Lord knows what it took you to get to logging on and sitting down to really listen to this recording. And what I ask of you is that you join me in the next half hour with an open mind and an open heart to really receive information that I think is invaluable for your health and your well-being. When we're talking about proper workstation ergonomics, majority of us are working at a workstation, whether it is in office or at home, and really creating the best type of setup for yourself can mean longevity in the future. And that's where I really want to start, is understanding why this is so important. Sometimes we need to see the numbers and the research behind the the what to do, because it can be very motivating. So let's get started here. And as we get into this conversation, I like to think about, are your lifestyle choices and the things that you're doing, are they helping or are they harming you? And if you can first just self-evaluate the choices that you're making and identify if they are moving you towards health or moving you towards disease, then you have a starting point of where you can go from here. And so let's just look at, how many hours in a day we are sitting, because to really understand the importance of a proper workstation setup, it's identifying, well, why is it so important, and how much time are we sitting? So I like this graphic. It looks at how sedentary is the typical American each day. And I want you to understand that sedentary is an umbrella or a category that sleep includes. If you have sedentary lifestyle, that includes your 6 to 8 to 10 hours of sleep, but it also includes sitting. And so you really need to be able to identify the difference between, sedentary and sitting and sedentary and resting. But what they're seeing, including sleep, is that the average person is sedentary for 21 hours of their day. That includes 8 hours of sleeping, and then we drop into how many hours a day of work, which was 7.5, watching TV 1.5, leisure time 1.5 hours, computer time at home 1.5 hours, eating 1 hour, and then we've got, actual activity and standing is around 3 hours. And so when we look at this number, we say, is that okay with you? When you know the research and what sitting is doing to our health and our bodies and what it increases our risk factors in, it's not okay with me. So we're talking about living a sedentary lifestyle in our active hours. That's where things have got to change. So let's dive into some more here. So here we go. The time is now to change our choices and improve our lifestyle. This is the only moment we have, and it is in this moment we can choose to be proactive and make a different choice, or we can stay where we are comfortable and do what we've always been doing. And certainly in my conversations with foundational health of the average American, and looking at how COVID and the pandemic has impacted the average American who is dealing with chronic disease, is unhealthy, is making poorly informed choices. I think this is really a reflection of, we've got to make the change now, because that's all we have. And so in the terms of sitting, it is, how can we make a change now to sit less? Okay, so let's just take a look at this graph. This is looking at, we can all agree that sleep is vital and sleep is important for health and well-being. We're actually going to be doing a workshop on it here in the next couple weeks, maybe December or January, to really dive into the importance of sleeping. But when we spend more time sitting, we're actually seeing that there is a link between poor sleep and increased sitting time. So if you take a look at this graph here, when you spend less time sitting, you get better quality sleep. When you spend more time sitting, you get more very bad to fairly bad sleep. Sleep is the time where you regenerate. It is a time where your body and brain recover from a full day of activity. We can get into all the details as far as how important sleep is as it relates to health measures. But when you're sitting more, it impacts your ability to rest, recover, and regenerate from the day-to-day stresses that you experience, on a regular basis. So increased sitting, then increased sedentary lifestyle, and impacts your sleep. Now let's dive into this quote. This is from Dr. James Levine out of Arizona State University. Sitting is more dangerous than smoking, killing more people than HIV, and is more treacherous than parachuting. We are sitting ourselves to death. And as you are sitting there, I would challenge you to say this out loud. We are sitting ourselves to death. We are sitting ourselves to death. There is no other time in history that human have been required to be in one position and sitting as required for work and tied into technology. And that long-term cumulative impact is really showing some really poor stats when it comes to what we're seeing, health and risk factors. So we are sitting ourselves to death. It is more dangerous than smoking. We all can agree smoking is not great, right? But sitting is just as dangerous. So let's go to this next slide here. So people who sit 6 hours a day or more, and actually before I get into the slide here, I have this great article here, and it talks about sitting disease by the numbers, okay? And one part of this article here is it highlights a research study done in 2010 by the American Cancer Society, and it was published in the American Journal of Epidemiology. And they followed 123,000 individuals, almost 70,000 women, and just over 53,000 men. And they followed them for 13 years, from 93 to 2006. And the results were alarming. Women who were inactive and sat over 6 hours a day were 94% more likely to die during that time period studied than those who were physically active and sat less than 3 hours a day. Men, you had it a little bit better, but men who were inactive and sat over 6 hours a day were 48% more likely to die than their standing counterparts. So these are pretty harsh and alarming numbers, and that's the reality. If you're sitting 6 hours a day and lead a sedentary lifestyle, women, nearly 100% of you will die. Men, half of you. So people who sit 6 hours a day or more die earlier than those who sit 3 hours or less. They're more overweight. Almost half of them more likely to be depressed. We see increased risk of lung and endometrial cancer. And we see, even for physically active people, the risk of developing these cancers worsens with every 2 hours of increased sitting time. These are some scary numbers. And this is where we need to be intentional around how we are creating our day around the work that we do. And so one of the first things I talk about when we dive into really sitting in the sitting workshop is know your numbers. How many hours a day are you sitting? And if it's 10, 12, 14, if it's 8 hours, then how can you create an environment where you're, dialing that sitting time down, because you want it less than 3 hours, because these are pretty dire consequences. We are talking about your mortality with, with your lengths of time that you are sitting every day, that I am sitting every day. So when we're talking about our longevity and how it's impacted by our lifestyle choices, this is what we see. When we see increased sitting, we see increased cancer, we see increased heart disease, we see increased obesity. And these are kind of the heart disease, #1 killer of Americans. Cancer, we're seeing increased rates of cancer and that prevalence. And then obesity is a comorbidity or co-complicating factor to a lot of chronic diseases. And how does this relate to, our health and well-being and our mindset, right? We go back to 50% or 47% are more likely to be depressed. We definitely have some mental health challenges and stresses in this country. And if we're talking about sitting predisposes you to depression, then we got to change that, right? Some other dire research. Sitting is the new smoking. This is why. Effects of long-term sitting are not reversible through exercise or other good habits. So you could be sitting for 6 hours or more. Every 2 hours increases your risk. But if you exercise 3 hours a day, you're not going to be able to reverse the impacts of long-term sitting. The only way to minimize the risk is to limit the time we spend sitting. And I will argue that majority of us have spent cumulative time long-term sitting just because of the structure of our school system, right? If any of us went through preschool, kindergarten, grade school, junior high, senior or high school, any of us went to any level of further education, whether it's a VOTEC or a four-year college or pursued more, we're talking about already 18 years, 16, 18 years of long-term sitting. So this is really a challenge to you and a wake-up call to consider, how can I change my work environment and how can I minimize my risk, and do that every day, because it is so vital for your well-being and your longevity, right? Mortality, heart disease, cancer, obesity, just by reducing your sitting. I think this was a last add-in of my slide here, but this is Emma. Emma doesn't look so good. And this was a report titled The Work Colleague of the Future. And this is a team of health experts led by behavioral futurist William Higham, who looked at survey data submitted by more than 3,000 office workers in France, Germany, and the UK. Percentage of UK office workers who said they already suffered from sore eyes, 50%, sore backs, 48%, and headaches, 48%, as a direct result of their environment, informed the design of the sickly Emma, who also suffers from stress-related eczema, excess weight, and swollen limbs. He goes on to say, unless we make radical changes to our working lives, such as moving more, addressing our posture at our desks, taking regular walking breaks, or considering improving our workstation setup, our offices are going to make us very sick. And so I think we tend to be vain. That's just in our human nature. So, as we look at these stats, they are alarming. But if we look at how our work environment and our choices impact our structure and how we look over time, taking a look at Emma is not so pretty, right? She's not looking so good. So, if we can be upright and we have movement in our spine and we are mobile, we are healthy, Not only that, but we feel good and we function very well and we look good. Anytime we see movement forward in this flexed position, this is an unhealthy brain, and an unhealthy brain means an unhealthy body, unhealthy immune system, poor adaptability, and poor resiliency. And you add in any type of stress to this body, you're talking about breakdown, you're talking about increased mortality, you're talking about less life. And so this is where I urge you, number one, know your numbers. How long are you sitting in a day? And what can you do to reduce your risk factors on a day-to-day basis? So I recorded, so I'm going to go ahead and show you a recording that I did earlier this year on proper workstation ergonomics. And then we're going to break it down once we go through this short video. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here with you, and we will listen to this short video. And once we are done with that, we will break it down. Hello, Dr. Miaken Zeigler here, chiropractor at Zeigler Chiropractic. And today is part 2 of our series of locking down your health while at home. And in part 1, we covered the hazards of sitting. And oftentimes we're sitting in front of a workstation. So today I really want to dive into how can you have the best ergonomic setup for your workstation at home. Certainly this will help to clean up some of the things you have at your office, but we care about you right now, and most of you are at home. So let's start there. So we'll start at a seated workstation, and when we look at seated workstations, I want you to look at what is your chair situation. Not an ideal chair here. I would prefer you to be in a chair that has a nice back. At the height of where your knees should be slightly more than 90 degrees. Okay, I don't want you up here, and I don't want you like tipping off your chair, but it should be just slightly more than 90 degrees. And what you can do is you can roll up a towel and put it right behind your low back so you have nice lumbar support. So this is great in terms of best seated posture. And then what I want you to look at, your desk height. I mean, elbows should rest nicely along your waist, and your desk height, you know, you really should be at a slightly larger angle at your elbows, resting comfortably here. Wrists should be neutral, okay? If you have your keyboard up here, that's a problem. That's gonna cause some stress on the wrists. And I've got my laptop here. In a moment, you're going to understand why your laptop is not the best workstation computer in any scenario. But first, how far away should you be from the screen? So if you look at, you know, how wide this screen is, I think this is about 15 inches. If it's 15 inches, you should be 15 inches from the screen. So here you can get an idea of, if you work with 2 monitors, or maybe even 3 monitors, you take the width of all 3 of those monitors, and that's how far away you should be from the screen. So you can start to see how it can be really challenging, depending on what your work setup is, to be perfect in how you arrange your workstation. Here's the other thing that I don't love about laptops. So yes, should be neutral here, but you should be seeing the screen at eye level. You should not have to look down. Screen should be 30 degrees from vertical. And so if you're looking at a laptop, this is really appropriate in terms of screen height. And you can see if you're up there, what's going to happen with the wrist situation. So it can cause some stress to the upper extremity. I will say, if there was a hierarchy, it's always the neck before the extremities. So I would consider, I'd probably lift this up, maybe even push that back so that I'm not tilting so far forward. But here's the thing, if you think you're going to be at this workstation for a month, 2, 3 months, it would be beneficial for you to just get a monitor. plug your monitor into your laptop. You can get the appropriate height there and not have to worry about jimmying this thing up and down, depending on how the wrists are feeling, depending on how the neck is feeling. Let's move on to potential standing desk here. So I've got this makeshift standing desk over here. And this is actually, I've seen patients do this. This is a desk or a table that we got at IKEA for $15. I think it's a kid's desk. And I actually see patients putting this guy on top of a desk they already have to create a really simple and really cheap standing desk situation. I'm going to tell you, standing is always going to be preferred to sitting, because at least when you're standing you can move around, you can do movements that can engage your structure. And actually I believe there's research out there showing that people who are standing tend to be more productive at work. So wouldn't that be nice to be more productive? But same thing here. Hey, again, you want neutral arms, you want to be resting at your sides. You know, again, looking at neutral wrists. This is going to be tilted at 30 degrees. The only thing I would say that changes here is the recommendation is that you have maybe a garbage can or a step stool that you turn on the side, and then you can rest your leg one at a time on that garbage can or on that step stool, just to give some relief to the structure through here. Let me see. Any other? I think if you are doing those pieces, you're already set up for success more so than as somebody who's not even thinking about their workstation situation. The last thing I will say is when you're standing here, ideally, you want to be stacked, okay? Your ears should line up with your shoulder, your hip, your knees on down, right? So if you are here, which a lot of us tend to be, and you're here for long periods of time, that's going to cause some stress in your structure. So just every now and then check in with your posture and how you're utilizing this. And again, I would say, you know, if you can invest in something, whether it's a $15 IKEA table or it's an actual standing desk, this is going to be by far an investment that will take you long term. You know, its payback will be over and over, because sitting is so stressful to the body. So like I said, I will attach this at the bottom of the video, because I think this is a great print off for you to just take a look at and start revamping your situation that you have here at home, so you can be your best working, but also taking care of you. I appreciate you. I love you guys. If I can be supportive in any way, please let me know. And stay tuned next week as I dive into more topics that really are looking at. Okay, so I like having the visual to see how you can start setting up your workstation appropriately. I think that video was a prime example of how challenging it can be to really create an ideal work environment, no matter what you do. And most people I find are working with, you know, 2, sometimes 3 screens. No matter what you are doing to limit your risk, it's still stressful to your body, still stressful to your structure. And so you've got to be really intentional around creating opportunities for you to get up and move around and engage your body in a very different way. So let's just go over some of those workstation points that I had addressed in that video there. So when you're seated, obviously by far standing is the most ideal setup. Here's the thing, if you are sitting during your day and you're spending 6-8 hours of sitting, when you start transitioning to a standing desk, you're going to do it over time. You're not going to go from sitting, you know, 8 hours a day to standing 8 hours a day. That can be very stressful to the body. And I will say, any posture that you're in long term will also stress the body. And so you want to slowly transition into standing more, sitting less, right? You didn't just go from, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to go from, you know, crawling to running. There's a transition that takes place there. So you've got to transition your body to prepare to be able to stand for longer periods of time. Take a picture of the screen, but again, when you're seated, elbows are around 90, knees are around 90. I didn't talk about the torso, but the torso is around 90 to 100 degrees. Monitor is at eye level. Now, if you watched the video there, you saw me hold up that laptop and I said, this is about eye level. And even I was too low. So that's where when you think that you've got the best setup, I want you to give these, indicators for creating a best ergonomic setup. I want you to give that to somebody and they can evaluate you while you're sitting or while you're at your desk, because it's worth doing it right the first time. So monitor is at eye level, distance from the screen. Again, you take that diagonal, right? So if you have 3 screens, you need to be that far away. You're going to realize how difficult it is to have an ideal setup. So you're going to do and with what you can do. But feet will be flat on the floor or on a footrest. You can have a back support in your chair. And, items on the desk you use frequently, you want them closer to you. Items used less often, move them further away. So you're not, items are you constantly use, you don't need to reach and reach. This creates a repetitive stress to the body. Another option if you're seated is a half kneeling stance. You kneel, on a left knee, right knee is in front of you. You can go back and forth, right? Anything that will change your posture is a good thing here. When we're talking about standing, again, this is most ideal. Understanding the research and how sitting and long-term sitting impacts our levels of and our risks for cancer, heart disease, obesity, increases our mortality. I will tell you, don't wait for your employer to buy you a standing desk. You can use books, you can use that IKEA table, you can get a standing desk. It is worth the $15 to $300 for your health. Because if your situation is not going to be changing anytime soon, then you need the appropriate setup. And they do make standing desks for multiple monitors. And furthermore, I would say if you have a laptop, get yourself a monitor that you can use so you're not using the laptop, because the laptop is also very stressful. So again, ideal height for a standing desk is elbow height. Okay. And elbows, again, close to the body. Keyboard should be hip level, so the hands are at the height of the elbows or slightly lower. Wrist should be at 180 degrees from, should be at 180 degrees to the forearm. And same measurements, right? Distance from the eyes to the screen should be roughly what the size of the screen is, tilted back at 20, 30 degrees. Shoulders should be back. Head should be above the spine, and that's where you turn over that garbage can or that footstool and you rest one leg and then the other. So these are really basics for ergonomic setup. And if we just dive into, other considerations, that's what I would look at are what are the shoes you're wearing? If you have to be wearing professional attire, have a pair of comfortable shoes you just leave at your desk. Change into those when you get to the office in the morning. A good standing desk mat can help reduce fatigue, and props are really great. If you jump down to one of these last bullet points, I talk about posture interruptions. If you can frequently interrupt your posture, and the gold standard is every 15 minutes, interrupt your posture, you're engaging your brain and your body in a way that doesn't get you sedentary and into this static posture that can stress your system. So that's where props can be really wonderful. I've got a picture of a vestibular disc. I've got a picture of an exercise ball. But if you put the disc on a chair or you sit on a ball instead of a chair, even those micro movements engage your spine in a very healthy way. Perhaps consider rearranging your desk, right? If you have multiple monitors and you always have one program running on this one, maybe switch them, right? If you have a phone that's always on the right side, change the phone. Try using the mouse with your other hand, right? If you are constantly printing things or have to use other technology in the office, put them far away so that you have to get up and move. It's all about how you can be intentional with creating a workspace where you don't get into those repetitive postures and motions. And that's where nobody's ever taken me up on it. But if you do, let me know how it goes. Use the mouse in the opposite hand. Switch the programs on your monitors. Not only will it be challenging at first, but it's great for your brain. And the last thing I would say is know how long you're sitting. If we know that 3 hours or less decreases risk factors, reduces your chance of early death, reduces your chance of cancer and heart disease and obesity, then first know how long you're sitting and work to get that down to 3 hours or less over time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it can happen. And frankly, you are worth it. Your health is worth it. And so are the people that love you, right? They want you to be healthy and they want you to be around for as long as possible. And likewise, right? So I believe I've hit my 30-minute mark. Here's got a lot of references there, but this is what I want to end with. I want to end with, please share what you know. The only way people will ever start making different, more informed decisions is if you share what you know, they start hearing information differently, and they start making different choices. And people who see chiropractors tend to be healthier. They are healthier according to the research. And it doesn't happen overnight making all of these decisions, but as you start to make decisions and as your brain and body are better connected and you have more clarity and focus and you feel better, it's easier to make these decisions. So I ask that you share this video with anybody who is working at a workstation so they can create health and change their longevity and maybe start their journey off to healthier lifestyle. You know, if you haven't had your spine checked, you need your spine checked. You need to understand how important that structure is and how it relates to the brain and how your brain processes your environment, and ultimately how resilient you are to stress. You're amazing. You're wonderful. Your body's a miracle. You just need the right tools. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you all. And I look forward to seeing you on our next workshop and engaging with you in a way that helps support vitality and longevity for years to come. So Dr. Miaken here, and I will look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.